Alrighty, thank you all for coming. I'm Summer, I'm the curator here at the museum. Before we get started, everybody please take a second to turn off or silence your phones so we don't have any disruptions. As for announcements, we will be having our annual Community Appreciation Day on Saturday, July 23rd. So mark your calendars for that. Admission to the museum will be free all day, and we'll be having activities for kids in the parking lot, as well as live music from 10 to 2. And we've also been working with the City and Peck Alumni Association to create a permanent exhibit about Peck High School at the Peck Center. The grand opening for that will be on Saturday, August 13th. As for upcoming programs here, our July 3rd on July 15th will be with me. I'm going to be speaking about the early history of Peck High School, drawing on the research I did for the upcoming exhibit I just mentioned. I'm going to be covering the inception of the school in the 1800s up until the 1920s, when the current building was built, now known as the Peck Center. And then our August Brown Bag Lunch on August 3rd will be with Taylor Clem, who is Nassau County's Horticulture Extension Agent and County Extension Director. His talk is called Becoming a Lazy Gardener. So that's it for announcements, but today we have Dale Martin. While completing his advanced degree in public administration, Dale Martin was also commissioned as an infantry officer in the U.S. Army. After serving in Germany, he returned to the United States and embarked on his career as a local government manager. He served in 4 Michigan communities over 15 years before moving to a town in Connecticut for 4 years and then on to Fernandina Beach in November 2015. He is currently our city manager. So everyone please welcome Dale.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the invitation to come and share one of my vices with all of you. So I look forward to sharing this with you. A lot of these are the games that you grew up with. The traditional Yahtzee, Trouble, Monopoly, Battleship, and Scrabble. But the era of board games has changed. That's my board game collection.
Oh my God.
Now, I have two friends here. I have Curtis in the back and Harry. Curtis lives in Yulee, Harry lives over by the lighthouse. Harry just moved here from North Carolina, and Harry's collection dwarfs mine.
Oh my God.
So if there's a game you want to think about, it's somewhere between Harry and my collection. This is an entire room at my house. They're alphabetized. Oh wow, a little bit of OCD there. This was the very first game that I discovered gaming with. At the time, I was a high school student. I was looking at possibly going to the Naval Academy and getting into submarines. Being colorblind, the red-green thing, there's a lot of red-green things on submarines, so I couldn't do that. But this was the first game. It was by a company called Avalon Hill. It was a 2-player war game, and basically you could create naval situations during World War II. And basically it was a different type of chess. You could play a German U-boat commander, one player, and a British destroyer commander on the other side. A lot of charts, a lot of dice, a very unimaginative board. But that was the first game that I bought when I was on a vacation somewhere. Since this is a museum of history, Avalon Hill, the heyday of the war games was probably the 70s and the 80s. These are Avalon Hill games. Avalon Hill was one of the premier manufacturers of games during that time. There were other manufacturers. Most of my games tended to be Avalon Hill. There were, like I said, other manufacturers. But these are all 2-player games. Submarine, Africa Corps, there's North Africa during World War II. Bismarck is another naval game. Flat Top, carrier battles in the Pacific. Air War. Blitzkrieg is the only one that's not truly historically based. It's you have the Great Blue and Big Red are the 2 nations, and you each have identical forces, and you're playing on a hypothetical map. So it's kind of a different version of chess. But it's a way to engage minds. Jutland is a World War I naval game. Midway, we just, well, that was last month. Midway commemorates the Battle of Midway, and Wooden Ships and Iron Men is John Paul Jones' Napoleonic era of ships. So these are what they refer to as flat box games, and then there were games called bookcase games that you stand vertically, like these games here in front. Again, more of the World War II, We the People at the bottom. It covers all of the eras of conflict, and games go back. There's Gunslinger, which is gunfights in the Old West. There's games of chariot racing, of gladiator combat, of future Star Wars, space, and things like that. All of these are predominantly two-player games. Some of them are even solitaire games that you can play against the game system themselves. These games are, it's the old guys like me that have all these games, and what's happening is we're trying to encourage these games where you primarily found them when I was a kid. You found them in what were called the old hobby stores, where you go to buy the plastic models that you put together, and you can tell they're all colorfully packaged and they would draw your attention. The problem is these days, unless you know where to go to these stores, it is hard to draw new people into gaming because most of it's unfortunately online. There's a few local stores. There used to be one on the island that's since closed. So the closest game stores you're going to find are down in Jacksonville. Smaller mom and pop shops, things like that. But unfortunately, you're not going to wander across game stores or the websites. But this is a game that reintroduced Americans to the new golden age of board games. This is called Settlers of Catan. It's now just called Catan. They've repackaged it. This actually started in Germany because Germany has a much stronger tradition of board games. They don't have kids at PS1s and 2, none of the electronic stuff. They play board games as families. So Settlers of Catan came out in the mid-1990s, and it reintroduced America to traditional board games. You can play this with 2 to 4 players, and it's a negotiation game. You accumulate resources and build houses and roads and so on and so forth. A very entertaining, highly popular game. It was, I don't know, you might tell me, I don't know if this won Game of the Year or not. I don't think it did. There's a German award called Game of the Year.
So on the cover there on the left, does it show?
Yeah, maybe it did. I think this logo. Yeah, German Game of the Year for 1995, U.S. Board Game of the Year for 1996.
Oh, okay.
So, popular, relatively easy game to understand. These games, which I have here, these are what are considered the premier gateway games. So if you want to get into gaming without getting inundated with rules and charts for some of those games, these 3 I would consider some of the premier gateway games to get people into gaming. Ticket to Ride was the first game of the year, I think, that was awarded to an American designer, and this was 2004. And they now when they publish this game, it's like McDonald's, so many millions of hamburgers sold. That's how many games of Ticket to Ride have been sold. And Ticket to Ride, we were talking about how many different versions of Monopoly there are out there. There's a Monopoly for every university, for every state, for every sports team, so on and so forth. It's the same way with Ticket to Ride now. There are Ticket to Ride for Europe, and I'll get a little more into detail of the game to show you how simple these games can be. But there's games for different countries, different regions of the world, different states now have created their own versions of the game as well. So this is basically a selection of actions you can do on your turn. You take one action. Your turns basically take about 5 seconds. And I'll explain that more later. Stone Age is what is referred to as a worker placement game. You have little people. These little people are commonly referred to as meeples. Okay, so if you ever hear somebody talk about meeples, they're just little wooden people. And you have different actions that you place your people on, and when I place mine on this action, you can no longer place your person there. So it becomes a game of what do I think is my priority, and the screw factor, you screw your fellow opponents by taking the role that they want, and so on and so forth. So that's Stone Age. And then Carcassonne is what's referred to as a tile laying game. There are tiles that have different features on it, whether it's a castle, a farm, or a road. In the basic game, and you lay tiles, and you claim points as you lay tiles, and you basically create this urban landscape. It's a medieval-based game. So these are the three, if you want to get into games with yourself, with friends, with family, grandkids, they're all, this is Stone Age, it says age 10 plus, Carcassonne is 10 plus, and Ticket to Ride is probably 10 plus, I would estimate as well also. So this is Ticket to Ride. And basically it's a map of the United States, and it's a scoring track around the perimeter of the board. And on your turn, you have one of three options. You can claim cards, 2 cards, and what you're trying to do is, it's a set collection. You're trying to get all of yellow or all of green, because say you want to connect Kansas City to St. Louis, you need to have 2 blue cards or 2 purple cards, or pink. Remember, I'm colorblind. Purple or pink. So on your turn, you can draw more cards into your hand. And that's the most common thing you do on your turn. Draw 2 cards, okay, Harry, it's your turn. Harry takes 2 cards, it's Curtis's turn, so on and so forth. Your hand size is unlimited. You can keep as many cards in your hand as you want. The other option you can do is then you can play those 2 blue cards to put 2 of your color trains. The color of your trains is completely irrelevant to the colors on the map. So if I'm playing yellow, I'll put 2 of my yellow trains on the blue because it's blue cards. So the color of your trains is completely irrelevant. It just denotes. And when I play those 2 trains, there's a sliding scale for how long of train you play as to how many points you score. So if I play 1, where's the 1? Nashville to Atlanta is only 1. Gray means it can be any color, but it all has to be the same color. Okay? So if you play a 1-length train, and when you play them, you have to play sufficient trains to connect the 2 cities. So you can't play like 1 Kansas City and then the next turn play another Kansas City. You have to play, and you can only do 1 connection. So if I had 2 blue and 4 black, I choose one or the other. So if it's 1 long, I get 1 point, and I place my marker on the 1 point. It goes up exponentially, because when you play 6 in 1 turn, you score 15 points. So 1 6 long train is worth a heck of a lot more than 6 1 trains. The third thing is you can take what these are called tickets. And these are bonuses. If you connect these cities during the game, you get these 12 bonus points. If you connect Boston to Miami, you get 12 points. Denver to Pittsburgh, you get 11. And for the geographically challenged, it actually shows you roughly on the map where the cities are. The challenge is, at the end of the game, if you don't make these connections, you lose those points. And you're dealt 3 of these to start the game with. So you do these secretly. So if I connect Boston to Miami, I don't tell everybody that I finished it. So at the end of the game, it becomes aha, I connected this, and so you tally up the points. So those are your 3 options on your turn. Draw cards, play trains, draw tickets. This is the least likely action you do, but if you're going to win the game, this is the action that you become familiar with. So a lot of times you'll build a somewhat reasonable route across the country and then start grabbing more tickets and trying to complete them. When they're side by side, this is where you get up messing with your friends and neighbors, and you start blocking them, and so on and so forth. This game can handle anywhere from 2 to 5 players. But again, your turns probably just take a matter of seconds once you're familiar with the game. Draw cards, place trains, draw tickets. So an exceptional introductory game to the new era of gaming. Another series of games. These are strictly 2-player games. They're fun. Tally-ho. Tally-ho is one player plays as the humans and the other player plays as the animals. And you basically hunt each other, and then you switch sides and do it again, and you combine your score. So the human side, you have hunters and you have lumberjacks. The lumberjack's job, he cuts down trees. And on the animal side, you're controlling bears. The bears eat the humans. And then there's foxes who chase down, there's other animals, birds, pheasants, and ducks. And you get points for eating the pheasants and ducks, eating the lumberjacks. So it's a fun little game. And when we're done here, if you want to look through any of these games. Caesar and Cleopatra is a 2-player game. It's a card game. You have 2 completely asymmetrical or different decks of cards. So Caesar has some strength cards that do things that Cleopatra's cards can't do, and vice versa. Lost Cities is a game of exploration. You basically you play cards in sequence. You may be looking for the abominable snowman or looking for Atlantis and things like that. So it's a game of bluffing as well. Balloon Cup is a math game. If you don't like math, don't do Balloon Cup. A lot of these games are actually designed by mathematicians. But Balloon Cup is a fun game where you sometimes you want to have the highest total of cards played, other times you need the lowest total of cards played. But they're great 2-player, games for couples, things like that. If you lose these, someone's not going to sleep on the couch, but there's other games that do that. So once you get through these games, just to give you an idea that there's basically a game for almost everything. I'm kind of talking fast here. So Letters from Whitechapel is a game of Jack the Ripper. 1 player plays Jack, and all of the other players, you can have 1 or 2 or 3, however many you want to be the cops. It's not as much fun with 2 players because as Jack the Ripper, it's fun to hear the other team debate because the game is all about moving on a map and Jack doesn't show up on the map. Oh. Okay, so the other 2 are like, well, I think he went here. We ought to move our police here. No, I think he went over here. So it's fun as Jack to hear that interaction and then be able to go back later and say, yep, you should have listened to Curtis. Never listen to Curtis. Never listen to Curtis. We should have gone that way, but he went this way. So that's no dice involved in this game. It's all logic and deduction about Jack has to basically kill 4 victims and get back to his hideout. He wins the game, and all the police have to do is capture him once, and then the police win. Demacher is a very niche game. It's a game of German parliamentary politics. To show you that there's a game for everything. So that game rarely makes it to the table because it's one of those, the first time you play it, you got to teach everybody the rules. But it is a very well-regarded game. Food Chain Magnet is you actually run a diner. Again, no dice involved. You decide how you want. Do you want to sell burgers or pizza? Do you want to sell soda or lemonade? Do you want to do, what kind of marketing do you want to do? Again, all card driven, no dice. That was one of the unique things that surprised Americans with Ticket to Ride is, where's the dice? Because we're so used to games that are commonly referred to as roll and move, whether it's, Monopoly or Chutes and Ladders as cards, but you just roll and you move, and there's not a lot of strategy to it, but you start doing the Ticket to Ride, like, man, do I try to get that one more black card to make that connection, and then somebody else, before it gets your turn, they claim the black card, the black thing that you were trying to get. So that becomes a tension without dice. This War of Mine, popular but a very dark game. This is a game, imagine if you are in Kiev right now. You play as a survivor in a war-torn third world Civil War city. And your job is to survive. So for a long time, the most recent thing that it was, the historic thing that was more tied to when people played the game was Sarajevo. Because that was one of the last major instances of a first world or a highly developed capital city under siege. So it was kind of set far enough back in people's memories that there wasn't that personal connection. So there's a lot of people that won't play this game now because it's too close. It's too, and the challenge is you start with 3 survivors and you have to survive for roughly a month. And it's a cooperative game, so you go around the table. There's about 6 phases to each day. twilight or dawn, morning, afternoon, and you go around the table, and at each phase, the first phase, I may be the game master. So I can ask my team, okay, what do you think we should do? But ultimately, the decision for my phase of the day is my decision. I can listen to Curtis and Harry and say, good ideas, but I think they're wrong. I want to do this. Or I can listen to their advice, take their advice, and then that role rotates around the table. So the next phase of the day, Curtis is in charge, and he gets to solicit our advice or say, I'm just going to do what I want to do. Then at nighttime, you get to decide how many of your survivors do you want to keep in your little hideout. How many do you want to send out and gather food? Okay, you have one weapon. Do you send the weapon with the people looking for food, or do you keep the weapon to guard your food supply? And a lot of bad things happen. But again, that's why it is actually based on a video game. It's one of the most emotionally gripping games that I've ever played in my life. But there is a dark side to it, so it's not for everybody. But like I said, it is a wonderfully, that's weird. It is a very engrossing game. This is one of the pinnacles of gaming. This is called Mega Civilization. If you're familiar, some of you may be familiar with a computer game called Civilization. The computer game Civilization, which is probably one of the best computer games ever sold, was actually based on the board game. So the board game, video game tie-in, that this war of mine that was first a video game and became a board game, the computer game Civilization started off as a board game and became a video game. Mega Civilization is a game incredibly simplistic in its mechanics. You start with one little band of settlers, and your civilization grows, and you trade with other people, you trade cards, and as you accumulate those cards, the more cards you collect of a certain type, and they're different commodities like linen or gold or things like that. The more you collect, the more valuable the set is, and you use those sets to buy civilization advances, like you discover sailing or astronomy or cloth making, things like that. There are 3,000 copies of this in the world, and there are certificates of authenticity for this game, so I was copy number 2,333. This game at the time I bought it was about $400. You can play this game with up to 18 people.
Wow.
You take a minimum of 5 to play, and the rough estimate is you will take 1 hour at least for every player in the game. So if you play with 18 people, you better book the entire day. But it's an incredibly engaging game, very simple in its mechanics. I've never played it with 18. Honestly, I'd never played with 18. But it's a fun game to start a civilization with one little piece and grow. And I may decide to do something more along a military route. Somebody else may develop their civilization more along a cultural route. And there's different ways of winning the game depending on which path you choose for your civilization. Not a lot of military. There's some military involved in the game, but mostly it's develop your own civilization and how you interact with people. There's some backstabbing in the game. There's disasters that happen. So when you trade cards with people, you have to trade a minimum of 3 of your commodities. You have to tell the truth about 2 of them. You can lie about the third one, so I may slip an earthquake to Harry, and then again, it's part of what they refer to as the metagame. It's like, okay, how long is Harry's memory that you slip me that earthquake, or piracy, or you launch barbarians against me? So it's a fun game. You do have to lie in the game. Curtis doesn't like games where you got to lie to each other. But it is an art of negotiation game. It's a fun game. Unfortunately, it doesn't get to the table much, but it's a simple game to learn, a long game to master. So where are some gaming stores? There are some gaming stores in Jacksonville. The closest one is actually Cool Stuff. They actually have online. That's down on, Beach Boulevard? And then there are several smaller ones out toward Jack's Beach. Things like that. But did you ever see the show, I'm trying to remember, Big Bang Theory?
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen that?
Yeah, they do that.
Okay. So those guys are gamers, okay? Now, unfortunately, with a lot of game stores, the true bread and butter for game stores is still Magic the Gathering. And unfortunately, there's a stereotype for the Magic the Gathering players, and it's unwashed, dirty, they all wear black shirts. So they're not the most visibly attractive once you get into them. But whenever I would go into one, my ex-wife would always say, like, you're going to take me to the game store. But there are several game stores. What is becoming more attractive are game cafes, where you can go and grab a beer or a sandwich, a pub, and have a beer. They'll have a library of games. Some of them have membership fees associated with them, so that you have to play. You're not allowed to bring your own games. You got to pay and use their games, or you have to pay a premium to bring in your own game. Those are growing in nature because people want, as they're coming out of the pandemic, they want to re-engage with each other. That's a growing thing. The best resource for games is Board Game Geek. It's online, and I sent an email to try and, I don't know if they responded yet. I'm trying to find out how many users there are. Board Game Geek's been around for 22 years. So this is a screenshot of Board Game Geek, boardgamegeek.com. And I think there's several 100,000 games in its database and several hundreds of thousands or millions of people that are users from across the world for this. And I actually sent an email to them earlier today asking for those specific numbers. Let me see if they responded. But all of my games, and I think Harry has his games, are cataloged here. So I know where my game is. If I've loaned it to Summer or whatever, I keep track of that stuff. You can log your plays, record, hey, I played with Harry and Curtis, and Harry won, so on and so forth. But every game, all these games are on there. If you want to look for a type of game, here are some of the categories that say you want to find a game, a game about farming. You check this box and hit search, and you'll get all the farming games that are in the Board Game Geek database. So these are just all the different categories. You've got trivia, war games, World War I, zombies, movies, mythology, Civil War, pirates, all these different categories. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you know how many games are on this site?
That's what I was trying to find. I know that it's several 100,000.
No.
100,000?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, there's several thousand new games every year.
Yeah, like my games, like you said, if I go back to my library, most of you have never heard of probably not one of the games other than the Parcheesi, the Scrabble, the Monopolies, the Yahtzees. I don't know how many of you have heard of these games before you walked into this room. So these are the categories, and so I'm open for any questions or comments or things like that. Yes, ma'am.
So with all the gaming online, are we saying that this is still obviously a very popular industry?
It's more popular than you think because I raised my kids strictly on board games. They did not have video games when they're growing up. My kids are in their mid-20s.
Yeah.
You can sit around and laugh and have fun. We don't need to be online. Do I play online games? Yeah, I play online games with Curtis and Harry. But to get a bunch of, we have Friday night game night. Every Friday night is game night at my house. And Harry and Curtis come over. We come over at 6:30, 7 o'clock, and we'll play for 3, 4, 5 hours. And well, some guys have a beer. Most people don't. They'll grab a soda, a water. Curtis brings over snacks. Things like that. So that's something that I think, at least I do. I look forward to that every Friday night. That is a great way to cap my night because we can play as late as we want. Nobody's got to work. Most people don't have to work on Saturday. So it is exceptionally popular. It's more popular than you think because it's the social thing that I think we all lost with the pandemic. There's games that are solo games that you can play by yourself, more than just the card solitaire and things like that. But there's a game for everything. And what I like to do at night, drove my ex-wife crazy, is A lot of people read a book at night. I grab rules. I like reading rules, things like that. So, yes, sir.
So then do you buy to add to your collection or buy to play?
I'm a player, not a collector. Now, as I told someone beforehand, with 600 games in my collection, if I played one game every day, it would take me 2 years to play them all and never played one again. Now, the reality is I'm not playing a game a day, I'm playing a game a week. So the likelihood, and I have several games in my collection that I've never played, but they're historically fascinating. And there's sometimes it's referred to as the cult of the new. I tend to like to find a game that we like, because what happens with what's called the cult of the new, there's always new, the latest and greatest game out there. Well, you play it once, like when Curtis comes over at night, and I say, Curtis, we're going to play this game, and Curtis has never played it. Well, Curtis and other people in our group, and believe me, the group is more than Curtis and Aaron, they're like, well, I'm not going to win because I don't know the game, I don't know the strategy and all that. So it's neat to be able to take some of these older games and kind of focus on them 3 or 4 times so people can understand the depth of the strategy to them instead of, here's a brand new game, let's learn it, and we'll never go back and play it again. So there is some depth, there's games in mine that will never be played, but it looks nice in the house. Just like, I'm sure a lot of you have books in your house you've never read, probably never going to read them, but it adds a character or warmth and an ambiance to your house. Yes, ma'am?
So the library sponsors a game night, the 4th Monday of every month at 5:30. And we have anywhere from 6 to 8 to 10 people. We try to bring simple things for people who don't know how, like Uno, we play Rummy Cube, Dictionary, 5 Crowns, and it's really fun. We've all got to be close friends.
Now, the thing, and I know that Mokama is running the game night, and I think First Love is mentioned. Now,
5:30.
a lot of times, the thing is even if you're going to play a simple game like Ticket to Ride, the first time you play it, you're going to take 3 or 4 hours to play. Once you become more familiar with it, you can probably play a game in an hour to an hour and a half. The challenge with businesses or libraries, are they open long enough? Because like Mokama, from what I was told before I got here, Mokama's running a game night, and they are open until 9 o'clock. Well, by the time you go home, have dinner, put the kids to bed, or get the babysitter or something like that, and you go to Mokama, you're not getting there until 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. So you only have 2 hours to play a game, which is suitable for games like 5 Crowns and Uno and things like that. But if you want to get into a game with a little more depth, you probably need 4 hours. And I'm not sure how late the library is open.
For 2 hours.
2 hours,
So we
right?
pick games that don't take.
Correct. I tend to like what are called the heavier games, the Mega Civilization, the Democker. My favorite game, 2-player game, is a game called Advanced Squad Leader, which is World War II infantry game. I probably have about $10,000 invested in that game alone. But the rule book is about this thing. You don't use all the rules, but again, I find all the games wonderfully engaging. You can find a game, we got railroad games, we got Star Wars types games, empire building games. We can find a game that anybody could like. And it's just a matter of sitting down, having, a lot of these, the best thing to do is have somebody teach you. So, believe me, we've talked about my little game groups. Yeah, maybe one Friday a month we go someplace that we can sit a little bit longer and say, hey, Curtis, you teach Ticket to Ride, here you teach Stone Age, and I'll teach Carcassonne. And just welcome people to learn these different games. I don't think this group, sometimes like, okay, you're going to have it at the museum. I don't know if you can like have beer at the museum. But the drinking is a second. Definitely, truly definitely not part of the gaming. It's not needed. But again, it's casual, and I think that's what I enjoy about it. It's the friendships you build. You just laugh. They got their rules like, okay, if you don't know what to do, pick on Dale. Just target Dale no matter what you do. If you don't know what to do, target Dale. That's Curtis' rule, the Curtis corollary. But, any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Is there a version of Mega Civilization that does not cost $400?
Yeah, they're actually coming up. That Mega Civilization actually covers Europe to the Far East, and I think they've come out with, and you can play the east side or the west side of that, and I think they've come up with a reduced version of that, just the east or just the west, that's probably $100 or $200. But these games, Ticket to Ride, a good game nowadays is going to cost you $50. And some of them you can get at, it's become more mass market, you can get them at, I don't know if there's Barnes and Nobles anymore. Right. Target is starting to carry some of these games as well. So they're easy to find, and again, you can go on to Board Game Geek. If you're not, it's not really on here. People sell games used on Board Game Geek, and you can find some, that what the aftermarket is for games. If you're not hung up on, well, I need it to be in shrink wrap and everything like that, you can go on here, go to there's a different page for every single game. So you type in the little bar up here. If you want to see my stuff, go up here and you can click up there and it'll say board game. You can do a caret menu drop for users, and my username is DMart. And you can see my entire collection. You click on a page. If you have a question about the rules, you post a question. People like to take pictures, or they do what they call trick their game out, that maybe these wooden people are just kind of bland and boring. Well, they'll get like 3D miniature dolls. The trains for Ticket to Ride, I actually bought, they're just standard plasticky looking, plasticky looking trains.
Yeah.
Like these?
Yeah.
They're all the same, they're just different colors. Well, I actually bought for another $40. There's actually little plastic models, like the black ones are old steam engines. The yellow one is they're a different type of locomotive. So you can kind of trick the game out and add your own little personal flavor to it. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to say they have all three of those games at the Walmart Off Island, and the Carcassonne is on sale for like $33 right now.
Okay.
We were there last night.
Okay. And I think that demonstrates the popularity that they are becoming more in your mass market stores like Target, Walmart, places like that. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to reiterate your point. I have two sons, 34 and 32, they're both married. When they come down here, we play games, or when we go to either of their houses, we play games. And Ticket to Ride you can learn in an hour. I looked at Settlers of Catan and I said, I can't play this game, this is nuts. But within an hour, I had figured it out, and it's a great strategy game. And if we don't, and they're both geeks, they both went to Texas, very geeky. If we're not playing board games, I have 4 people sitting in chairs at their laptops.
Right.
Yeah.
And the thing about the games is
They have Stone Age, Ticket to Ride, Settlers of Catan, a bunch of them. There's a bird one that's just...
that's called Wingspan. That's the new hot one.
That one's really fun.
Yeah.
And I just can't say enough for doing it with your adult kids and their spouses.
And it's not about, sure, it's fun to win, you go into a game to win, but it's about the social aspect of getting a bunch of people together, laughing, and having fun. Getting off your phones, unplug and enjoy the friendship and the camaraderie of other people. There is, now if you're really interested, there are board game conventions. One that, believe it or not, we actually host. We have a one-day, it's called the No Name Convention. It's actually next Saturday. Yours is the 15th, right? Your event is 15th. It's the 16th at the golf course, $5 entry fee. You can come in. It's open to anybody. And if you want to learn or sit down and play these games, I think, Kurt, are you guys going to be there next week or on the Saturday? We'll get people to teach you these games. There's bigger conventions. I go to one every year in Orlando. That generally gets between 3,000 and 5,000 people. And you can play board games, the ballrooms and the gaming rooms. They have a library with about 4,000 games in it. They're all barcoded. Your name tag has a barcode on it. If you want to play a game at 4 o'clock in the morning, you're going to find somebody to play with. And the game convention goes from like a Wednesday through a Sunday. You can play games for 20 to 24 hours a day.
The biggest game convention in the world is in Germany every year. It's in October, and they regularly have close to 150,000 people show up.
But if you want to just kind of peek in on Saturday the 16th at the golf course clubhouse. That goes from, I think, 9 in the morning to 9 at night. And generally, the last few, we do it like every 6 months. We get about 50 people to show up. So if you want to swing by and see what like Curtis.
Isn't the money collected, they're donated to like wounded warriors or?
Yes.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
not like anybody's trying to make a profit, they're actually doing.
The golf course doesn't charge us anything. It's not because I'm the city manager. But the agreement is gamers are notorious for smuggling in their own food and their own drinks. And the rule is you're not allowed to do that. You have to buy your food and drink from a grill at the clubhouse. And it's remarkably, it makes decent money for the golf course. But yeah, we get about 50 people. There's kids, there's adults, you know, men, women. It's a good way to waste the day. I'm sorry, the city golf course on Bill Melton and South Fletcher. Across the, you go down Via Del Rey like you're driving down to the Ritz. The city golf course. It's there.
And what's the name of it?
I'm sorry?
It's just called the City Golf Course?
Yeah, it's called the Fernandina Beach Golf Course, Golf Club.
And what are the hours?
9 to 9. And there'll be a raffle. When you sign up and show there, they'll give you like 5 raffle tickets, and they'll have like a dozen games that they're going to raffle off from local game stores. And you really want that game, put all of your raffle tickets in that little thing, and they'll draw one out. But yeah, it's, again, low key, a lot of fun, $5. Eric?
Is there a city manager game?
I've got several urban planning type games as well. I gotta have those. Right.
What's your favorite game?
The advanced squad that I talked about. And yeah, there's just so many fun games to play. Usually the challenge when they reach out, what do you guys want to play tonight? And they all look at you like, I don't care. You know, so getting to pick a game to play on Friday nights is always a challenge. We play card games, we play dice games, we play Hunt the Dragon games. We've got this game here, I didn't mention. This is a small game called Love Letters. Okay, typically this is a revised version, which I'm not really a fan of. But this game this is a whole game right here.
Wow.
And actually, the original game came with 16 cards and 16 cards only. They're all dealt one card. You draw a card, so there are 2 cards on your turn. And basically, it's a bluffing game. You're trying to guess. Each of the cards has a role. You're a princess, you're a king, you're a guard, you're something like that. And your job is to try and guess what somebody else's role is. And if you guess them correctly, they're knocked out of the round. Well, each round takes like 3 minutes. And then, based upon the number of players, you win these trophies. When you're the last one left in a round, then you do it again. And if you're playing, it's a 4-player game. I think this might allow for a few more players. But, you know, it'll say, first one to get 5 of these trophies wins the game. Well, each hand only takes like 2 to 3 minutes. You know, I think you're the guard. Nope. I think you're the baron. Nope. Each card has a little feature, and you're trying to guess or find a way to eliminate each player. On the highest card, the cards are numbered anywhere from 1 to 8. 8 is the princess. And if you have the princess and if you're ever forced to discard that card, you're automatically knocked out of the round. But there's only 16 cards in the entire deck, the entire game. This game will run you about $8 to $10. And just like Monopoly, there's a bazillion different versions. There's a Lord of the Rings version of this game. There's a Star Wars version. There's different kinds of versions. The classic is the traditional medieval kind of era theme. So that's Love Letters. But yeah, if there's any other questions.
Why is it called Love Letters?
Because you're trying to, the theme behind it is you're trying to deliver a love letter to the princess.
There's a princess.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
Can you explain what Wingspan is?
Wingspan is, I don't have Wingspan, I play Wingspan. Every card in the deck of several hundred cards is a different type of bird. And it's all about birds. It's about building nests, finding, you got birds that eat the swamp creatures, the mice, the worms, or whatever. The bigger birds, the game's called Wingspan because on every card it tells you, is it a tiny bird like a hummingbird, or is it a giant osprey? And it tells you, and there are certain cards that say, the bigger the wingspan, the more powerful the bird is, or you gain different bonuses. But again, it is a a very popular, relatively new game. It's only been out 2 or 3 years, I think. And they keep coming out with, and what happens is games have expansions. So, you know, you have the original Wingspan, and then they introduce the European bird expansion, and they add 200 more cards to the deck, or they add the African bird deck. So it becomes a money sink, but you're a lot safer this than at the bar. It's not gonna be any cheaper, but you're safe. Sir?
What are your favorite football games?
Well, you're finished, go ahead.
I mostly do board game miniatures, like Napoleonics, based on historical facts. You basically take over the roles of general with the same troops that they had, same weather conditions, supply lines, and stuff like that. And then you have to make your decision as that general, and it has a different outcome than actual history.
Yeah. My favorites always kind of revolve to different games, but I have a favorite theme. I like training games.
Yes, ma'am.
The title Cleo and, Caesar and Cleopatra, I can't even pronounce it, entices me. Can you discuss that for a moment?
Sure. And just to let you know, these are the rules. 2 pages. Okay, that's, you know, the back is just the title. Actually, I'm sorry, it's a little more. But these are the rules, and for all of these games. So Caesar and Cleopatra, you basically, each turn, you play a card, and you're create, it's been a long time since I played. But most of my games I can kind of pick up and with a quick reference to the rules be able to teach it relatively quickly. So there's different numbers cards that have different strengths. So as Caesar, I play a card. As Cleopatra, you play a card. And then at the end of the deck, you try to gain trophies through it. But it's what they call an asymmetrical game, in that each player has a unique deck from the other player. So that's been a while since I looked at that, so I'm sorry I can't give you a better explanation. Yes, sir.
Have you ever played Sheriff of Nottingham?
Yes.
How do you like that one?
Not one of my favorites. Sheriff of Nottingham is a bluffing game, a lying game. Curtis wouldn't like it. But it didn't resonate with me. It's a popular game. There's other games of that theme. There's a game called Red Dragon Inn, where you have different roles, and you're basically a bunch of swashbuckling drunkards in the Middle Ages. But another popular game that I didn't have there is a game called Agricola, which is actually a medieval farming game. That's a very popular game. You start off with a family of a couple, and you have to grow your farms and crops and tend your animals. And that's a worker placement game where you really end up truly messing up the other players. Very popular medieval farming game. And again, you think, how can medieval farming be fun? But that's a fun game as well. Very highly rated on Board Game Geek. You find out that the highest rated game on Board Game Geek right now is a game called Gloomhaven, which is a hunt the monster. It's what they call a fantasy game where you're fighting monsters and you take a different role. There's somebody who's like a spellcaster. Dungeons and Dragons is probably one way of kind of explaining it, but it's you each have a different character and you fight different monsters, gain different rewards. In some ways they call it a legacy game, where how you do in one game, the next time you bring it out, you go another one. You play different, and you go through this series of battles. As you win, you get strong as your character, and so on and so forth. Probably one of the most popular legacy games these days is a game called Pandemic Legacy. Pandemic, again, kind of like This War Is Mine. Pandemic is a cooperative game. You each take a different role, and you're trying to rid the world of these diseases. So you can understand why, okay, that got set aside for a while. But Pandemic Legacy is, somebody might be a medic, somebody else might be a researcher, somebody else might play the role of a scientist or a doctor, and you have to, as you go further and further in the game, the diseases start to multiply, and so it's a race to try and control those diseases. Each character has a special power. Very popular legacy game. You typically pay, I think the most you can play is 2 games per month. So you play 1 game in January, and if you win, you immediately jump to February. If you fail, you play a second game in January, and you basically play 1 year. So you're gonna have, but this is a game where you rip cards in half, you break things. That's what a legacy game is. Basically, it's a one and done. You finish it, you throw it away. But again, it's $50, $60 for that game. You're gonna get 24 plays out of it, at most. So all the fun you're gonna have for $50 for, many, many hours of gaming. So you're more than welcome. That's really all that I have. If you want to come up and look at some of these games, Curtis and Harry can probably come up and help. You look through some of these pieces and games and things like that. Yeah, like I said, my games, some of them are cheap like this and some of them are expensive, but they're a lot of fun. So thank you.
Thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you at the 3rd on 3rd next Friday, the 15th at 6 o'clock in this room.
All right.